Did you know that what you put in, on, and around your body plays a huge role in how you feel? Incorporating some holistic practices into your daily life can help combat the environmental toxins and influences that we are all vulnerable to. Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Reicheter, and today I'm joined by the founder of Daniella's Digest, co-founder of Kinder Beauty, and investor in ethical companies, Daniella Monet. Daniella is an actress best known for her role in Nickelodeon's Victorious. After removing animal products from her life 29 years ago and switching to a complete vegan diet about 23 years ago, she's developed a passion for helping end cruelty and support a healthy lifestyle, and has even enrolled in holistic nutrition school. As the founder of Daniella's Digest, she developed a membership community to help you strengthen your relationship with clean nutritional foods that are plant-based. Join us as we dive deep into all things pertaining to health and holistic health, what that looks like, and how it shows up in your life. Daniella, thank you so much for joining me today. I am really excited for our conversation. But before we jump in, I really just want to check in with you. How are you really?
Good question. I'm really good in this moment. It's been a bit of a roller coaster recently, but yeah, I feel really present, and I feel like I've been ticking all the boxes that I know I need to in terms of like the tools I know that work to keep me feeling my best.
That's amazing. I know for me, when I kind of have that roller coaster happening and trying to bring myself back into the present and just reconnect with myself, it can be so difficult to just find those tools and check those boxes and show up for myself.
Yeah, it's not always easy because our emotions are so intense at times. I mean, it's really hard to separate the feelings from like what we know is right, or even just tapping into like our spirituality and like a higher knowing of like good. And but I feel like I'm getting better at it, and I have more awareness around it. And I think that really just comes back to like ultimately knowing that I have the ability to protect myself. And even though these feelings and emotions can be so real, if I want to be able to do good, then I have to be able to tap into something higher so that I can then protect myself, so that I can like operate in a more efficient way than just feeling.
Yes, exactly. And just giving yourself space to feel, and also not like getting down on yourself for it and giving it up to a higher power, and knowing that everything happens for a reason and that there's so many things and tools out there for you. I'm really excited for our conversation on wellness and holistic wellness. I'd love to learn more about your journey.
Sure. So, like I kind of mentioned, I came from a very like ethical standpoint in regards to why I'm vegan, but since have grown in a lot of ways in my knowing. So, when I became vegetarian, it was because I was exposed to like visually seeing an animal suffer. But when I learned more about veganism, I was watching actually my uncle pass away from cancer, and my family trying to figure out and hold on to any hope they could. And one of the things that they did to help the alkaline in his body and help his blood cells regenerate and really save his life was, in the very last few days of his life, they tried to put him on a vegan diet. And we learned a lot about like what that was. And being that I was the only vegetarian in the family, I was extra curious to learn. And then one thing led to another. And you know how things go, where you're like, now my consciousness is like focused on how can I learn more and how could I absorb more information. And things were just starting to fall into my lap. And one really kind of funny one, but I'll mention it because it had an impact on me, was I read a book called Skinny Bitch. And it was not what you think. It has the most misleading title ever, but I was referred this book, or somehow I heard about this book, and it really talks about the food system as a whole, and like animal agriculture and factory farming and like nutrition in regards to that as well. And so even though I came from like a ethical standpoint, I saw what I could have in terms of like a health impact on a loved one. And then I learned about the economic impact it had on, the industry side of things. And for me, since then, I've just evolved in so many ways. I think understanding that sometimes things aren't what they seem has opened my eyes to a tremendous amount of knowledge in regards to, well, let's talk about, what health looks like and what health means. And I like to think of it as like a pie, and there are all these different slices, and each slice has an impact on your life. And like when I think about slices, I think of like, okay, well, nutrition, right? That makes a lot of sense. Nutrition, hydration, sleep, spirituality, body movement, connection, community, self-care, love, relationships, all these things are a part of my pie. And I like to sort of like do enough for each, right? In a perfect world, so that you feel the most balanced. But that's kind of how I sum up what holistic health, looks like today to me.
First, I want to say I'm really sorry about your uncle, but I love how you took something so positive out of it and were able to find something that works for you and develop more tools within your wellness. I don't think there's enough conversation regarding how what we put in our body, around our body, how we connect to people, the relationships that we have, the lack of care that we might put toward ourselves, lack of compassion, can all impact our physical health and really make a difference. I read a book too that actually sparked this for me. It was called Non-Toxic, A Guide to Living Healthy in a Chemical World. I didn't realize how many different things impact how we're feeling, from antibiotics and hormones that are pumped into our meat to the chemicals in plastics, and how we're consuming like a credit card worth of microplastics a year. It blew my mind to see how many different things were impacting how I was feeling.
Yes, I'm so glad you touched on all of that. It's pretty powerful. So, I can go real doom and gloom when I get into those kind of nitty gritties, because you can feel pretty helpless. But instead, let's talk about what we can do, and how we can basically rise above the things that are kind of inevitable today. There's a lot of awareness around this now, I think more than ever, which is amazing, right? So like having conversations like this and sharing with other people in your audience that we should know what's happening in our food system and in the products we buy and the things we consume. It's really hard to avoid some of these. So the things that we can do is start to like be obviously more mindful, but in addition, like look at cleanses and look at things that can support our all around immune system and help detoxify us on, ideally a daily basis, but at least a weekly or monthly basis. One person I can refer to off the top of my head, I mean, there's so many, but because there are so many heavy metals in, like you mentioned, antibiotics and, things are pumped into actually our meat. So we're consuming them whether we like it or not. If you do consume those foods, a heavy metal detox that, like the Medical Medium can, like, if you follow him, he has a great book and he has a lot of recipes. And these things are so easy because they're things that we are familiar with that exist today, but we don't take it as seriously until there comes a point when we need to. But I think a detox, like for heavy metals or even like plastic, microplastics, looks like wild blueberries, organic wild blueberries, and like different sort of blends and juices that we can just integrate into our lifestyle that can really help support ridding of those toxins, because a lot of them are hard to avoid.
Absolutely. And learning to detox different parts of your body, looking at what is good for your liver versus your kidneys. That was something that really kind of opened my mind. I was in college and of course we're drinking a lot of alcohol, and I didn't realize like that impacts your liver. And it's so important to be focusing on a liver cleanse so you're not destroying it at such a young age. I mean, we're in our early 20s and thinking we're super cool, consuming so much and not realizing how it can impact us later on. So finding the different things. I remember I bought a juicer and I started making celery juice in the morning and adding some ginger and turmeric into it to just start cleansing my body instead of allowing myself to only be putting these chemicals into my body, not completely giving it up all the time. I still love a good glass of wine, but paying attention to how that's impacting my body and what I can do to support my body through it.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly put. I think that there's a lot of balance in that. And I was going to ask like where you stand relationship wise with like alcohol. Because I think it's really nice to hear someone talk about something that they know may have a certain effect, but as are prepared with the tools to sort of combat that. Because like I said, you know, we can take alcohol out of our diet, which will absolutely have benefits, right? And maybe make it easier for us to feel healthier long term and even short term. But what happens to all the things that we're actually not even aware of? I mean, you walk outside and there can be, you know, pesticides, herbicides, or some sort of chemical just on your grass alone. And you're walking through the neighborhood, not even knowing what you're consuming by complete accident. So you have to sort of be working these steps into your life. And they're such a beautiful practice, and they don't have to be complex or too, you know, like they're just very simple, beautiful integrations that utilize nutrition and earth in a way that like is there for us, really.
Yes, exactly. Did you see that there's this company Roundup who they recently got in trouble because their chemicals were causing cancer? It was linked. And that was going on all of our lawns all the time. And we don't realize that we're walking through the grass barefoot. I love walking through the grass barefoot, but it's also really important that I am washing my feet afterwards using a good soap that is not full of chemicals. I learned that fragrance, the word fragrance does not mean it just smells good. That's a list of chemicals. So paying attention to then what I'm putting on my body, even lotions, perfume, skincare products, all of it, have to be so mindful. And I did not realize small things like running through the grass barefoot could be impacting me in a negative way.
It's so sad because I'm so glad you're aware of this, right? And I always teeter on this line of not overwhelming someone, because it can be so overwhelming and we feel so out of control when we know about some of these truths. What I like to always sort of bring up is like, if you think about the world in a simpler way, and I really feel like and maybe I live in a bubble, but I feel like there's like in an interesting way, there's like a regression happening in the world where people are kind of pulling back on some of these like advances, right? Or advancements that we've been exposed to over time, where people are now even looking at like the side effects of, you know, being on your phone for too long, or being exposed to blue light, or, you know, obviously the food system's a huge one, because when you talk about Roundup, you should talk about what's going into our farming, you know, just food, fruits and vegetables. Like, it's really kind of like can get really granular and it can become really overwhelming. But if you want sovereignty and you want to feel like you can have more control over your own life, you have to have certain things in play so that you can be able to live in a world that you can't necessarily control at all times. And what that looks like for me now is like simply like taking space for like the things I can't control, and like breathing in peace, and like having a practice around keeping me at like a baseline, because I am someone who wants to fix, and like who doesn't believe in injustice, and who wants to help people and expose these truths. But I'm realizing over time how stressful some of this knowledge can be, and how stress shows up in the body is like a whole nother way of like feeling awful, and could result in sickness and things of that nature. So I think if we're doing the best we can, and we are open to knowing and open to changing and open to growing, then we're doing what we should be doing.
Absolutely. I'm the same way. And I remember the first time that I got exposed to all the information, I tried to change everything like that. It's not possible. It's not possible to make 2,000 changes in one day. It's hard. It's overwhelming. It costs a lot of money to go buy a bunch of products that don't have dye and fragrance in it. And when you try to make all these changes at once, it just becomes really overwhelming. And if you don't have the tools and resources to be able to do it, it can then become very frustrating. I remember one of the biggest changes I made for a while is I tried to go vegan, but I didn't research or give myself any information on how to have enough protein in my body, right? Different vitamins and nutrients I needed to make sure I was getting, looking to see if there were different supplements. And I started to just not feel strong. And then I was so frustrated with myself because I was so annoyed by the antibiotics and hormones that were going into meat, how unfair and cruel animals are being treated. And yet I felt like I was failing at trying to do something to help and just make a difference within myself as well as for my body. So I ended up going to a doctor, getting a blood test run to find out what foods did and didn't work for my body, and slowly started to just remove things from my diet. And there are certain meats that I may add back in, like turkey once a week, or I might have fish once a week to give myself some extra protein as I'm still learning how to give my body the nutrients that it needs. But if I didn't realize that and realize that I couldn't just do it all at once, do every single thing all at once without having that information or guidance or wisdom, it became too overwhelming for my body and just my mental health as a whole.
Yes, thank you for saying that. I think you are so not alone. We all have emotional connections to food. We have sentimental connections to food. I mean, you and I are both Italian, and I will give you an example. Growing up, my nonna would make these sauces and she would cook the meatballs in it. And when I started to learn there was meatballs being cooked in the sauce, and I said, I don't want my sauce cooked with meatballs, she thought I was going to die. She was like, no, you need the meat. You need, So there's so much deconstructing. What I will say, and obviously I'm not a doctor, but I do know that you can absolutely be a healthy vegan, given the knowledge and, the tools and the resources. But I'm not even here to say that that's the only way. What I'm more passionate about is ending what is unjust and what's happening in the food system that we should all be not okay with. And how can we have a more holistic food system while still meeting the needs of people where they are? And so I do believe that will come with a reduction in meat, because I think in general, as a country and, just as a globe, we're over consuming so many things, and we have very little connection or consciousness around where things are coming from. And I think that piece alone, going back to sort of this spirituality piece, is so beneficial in so many ways. Where is the respect? Where is the understanding? Where is that real connection to food? And one of the things that I talk a lot about on Daniella's Digest is simply just cooking. Just being someone who enjoys cooking connects you to your food. You don't need to know much beyond that, but being a part of that process is really kind of a therapeutic practice. And I don't even know where I'm going with this, but yeah, I completely relate to what you're saying, and your awareness is spot on. And I think you're listening to your body, which you should be. Everyone should be. But I do believe that so many don't listen to their body, and they'd rather ignore what's happening because they're so conditioned to think that these things are just the norm or what they're used to.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, I'll give an example with my grandmother today. I caught her eating cake over the sink as lunch. And I was like, come on. I made you a nice salad. Please just eat that. You can have cake for dessert afterwards, but that can't be your lunch. Mm-hmm. And, this past week, she was in the hospital for high blood pressure. I mean, her blood pressure spiked 225 over 117. We spent 3 nights in the hospital. And that's just an example of not listening to her body and constantly consuming a lot of things that aren't good for her. She loves to have sugar and cake and cookies all as breakfast all the time. And then she'll pick on that during the day. And she's not listening to how it's spiking her blood sugar, how it's not making her feel good. It's making her feel really tired. And a lot of times we just, like, she loves sweets, absolutely loves sweets. That's going to be something she craves all the time, but she doesn't listen to her body and feel how it's impacting her. And that's a conversation I was having with her like 5 minutes before we started recording. It's so important to just listen to your body. You don't have to cut everything out completely if you don't want to, but being mindful with how much you're consuming. Like you said, we tend to overconsume and don't pay attention to how tired or lethargic we may feel afterwards.
Yeah. Wow. I'm sorry to hear that. I totally get it. You know, I've learned more about sugar through my schooling recently. And I mean, you've always heard for so long that sugar's not very good for you. And what ends up happening is people, much like addiction in other forms and other substances, sugar is very addictive, and it's actually a substance, and it has little to no nutritional value. And I almost want to say no, but I don't want to say that and be wrong, but I'm almost certain that it really doesn't have very much nutritional value. But our body begins to crave things like that, and you become like almost dependent on it because the addiction is so strong.
Yes, absolutely. And we don't realize how many of our foods contain sugar or like high fructose corn syrup. I mean, crackers contain this. Like, why does a cracker need corn syrup or sugar? We don't realize how it is kind of put into all of our foods and continuously like conditioning us to want more and crave more.
Yes, 100%. And that's when I kind of revert back to like that whole idea of like simplifying. Because when you think about things in a way where, for instance, let's use crackers as an example. Crackers are so readily available, right? And they're so accessible, and it's not something that like you can find them almost everywhere, right? And they're shelf stable, and they're usually pretty cheap, and it's just one of those foods that like you don't think much of, you don't give it much thought. But a food that's super processed, that can be so shelf stable, that comes at a low cost, that is like also one of those things where you can't stop eating, is usually not a nutrient dense food that, you know, it's not like in its simplest form. And so when I like to think about consumption, I try to even go back to like, well, how would our ancestors have done it? You know, like this is not a normal way. This is not what our diet would have like consisted of. And so I actually lean very much in the direction of like a whole food plant-based diet. So I don't actually consume many processed foods and or sugar. I mean, I'm not perfect, like these things exist and I'll indulge, but majority of my diet is very just as clean as possible and as seasonal as possible. And that's where I see like the most alignment. And in addition, the least amount of overwhelmed like a consumption. Like I find that people are overwhelmed sometimes and they consume because things are so accessible, as opposed to like being more conscious, like we've been talking about, and being more in alignment with like what's happening around us, like where your environment is. If you live somewhere more tropical, you're going to consume foods that have like make more sense for that. And I don't know, just like existing with nature as opposed to just consuming things that are there because you're being sold some lie.
Yes, absolutely. And it's so true. Things that are accessible and more affordable tend to be a lot more processed. And I mean, even soup, like, you know, when you're sick and you're younger, your parents tend to like just give you a bunch of soup, and canned soup or soup in restaurants, they tend to be so high in sodium. And they have like those sugars added into it as well. And we don't realize it. But simple things like you said, that connection to your food and cooking, and realizing we can be more in control of the ingredients we're putting into our bodies by cooking stuff ourselves, and even sometimes growing things if you can. Sometimes it's more expensive to buy certain vegetables and easier to buy the seeds if you live in an environment where that's possible and that's easy. I remember growing up, my grandparents had like, they grew all of our tomatoes, all the figs, like peppers.
Oh, yes.
I loved it. It was my favorite.
My Nona had fig trees, and to this day is my favorite fruit. And every time I can just devour, and every single time they'll say like, take the skin off, wash the skin. And I don't care. I eat the whole
No,
thing.
same. I love it. But it's so great when you can see that there's things that you can do to simply consume something that's a little more safe for you. It didn't cost a fortune to get the seeds to do the tomato plants or the fig plants. And of course, it's all seasonal, but being able to just have those ingredients on hand in an affordable and accessible way and be able to prepare foods for yourself that aren't so processed and just full of everything you should not be consuming constantly, because it's just not good for your body, both physically and mentally.
Yeah, it's so true. And I recently heard something on, I think it was Dr. Hyman's podcast, but he was saying that there's actually treatment available for sugar addicts, much like, yeah. And I don't know, don't quote me, but I'm almost certain that that's what he said, which makes a lot of sense because it's hard to kick it just like anything else. And, you know, just like I remember I gave up coffee back in November, and I had been a coffee fiend for years. Like it was just part of my ritual. But what I realized was it was more of a ritual than it was something that like I needed or wanted in my life. And you, of course, experience some withdrawals when you get off coffee. I did not understand really how addictive caffeine or coffee particularly was. But anyways, I just can only imagine what someone who might be addicted to sugar or addicted to processed foods because of the sugar and all the other, you know, ingredients in there that allure you to that food, like what that could look like deconstructing that diet. It takes a lot of mindfulness and a lot of self-control.
Yeah, the withdrawal can be so hard. I've tried to quit coffee so many times. I've reduced my consumption. I used to have like 4 to 5 cups a day because I was just constantly traveling and never sleeping. And now I'm down to 1 cup a day, or like I'll switch it out sometimes for like a matcha tea latte or just some green tea, and just changing out a little bit less caffeine, or it gives me a decent amount of caffeine, but it has just some health benefits for my body in different ways, has been so helpful. And I mean, coffee does have some health benefits. So I'm not saying coffee's terrible, but like just being so dependent on that caffeine. And when I stopped, I had these massive migraines. I just didn't feel good. And I didn't realize how much I was dependent on 4 cups of coffee a day to just function.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. I think that there's so much power in just the realization, you know, and like whether you make a change or not, I believe it's almost impossible not to once you've realized it.
Yes. Yes,
So
exactly.
even the switch up that you're doing where you're like, you know, reducing and adding in a matcha or whatever, like that changes so much for you.
Yes, exactly. And once you're aware, it's easier to see that there are certain things you can do and certain things you can change. Often I used to feel so helpless all the time. I was like, well, I don't know anything about this, so there's nothing I can do. Instead of reading different books, listening to different podcasts, doing Google searches, following the right accounts on social media, and learning more, I would just like blame my ignorance for not wanting to make changes. But as I made the time to read the books, become a lot more aware, I've just slowly made some changes, whether it's taking a mango and dehydrating it for myself instead of going and buying the dried one with the sugar. And it's just those small changes that I could easily do, subbing out milk for oat milk. Even one time I tried to make almond milk. I'm still learning how to do it because I didn't do a great job, I'm not gonna lie. But like just small things that I could try and constantly learn. I would never have done it if I wasn't aware, because I was like, well, I don't know much about it, so I'm not going to try.
100%. Yeah. And I so resonate with all that because I feel like just like anything else, the journey is so interesting. And like you do one thing and you're like, oh, I've made a change. And then you sort of elaborate on that change and you learn more and you grow and you continually like build on it. And it's really exciting and takes away that feeling of like being overwhelmed because you're just being protective of yourself and doing it at your own time. And I just wanted to add, I used to try to make almond milk and it was not my thing. I was like, you lost me at cheesecloth. Like, I'm done. It's a mess. Yeah, you lost me. But first of all, we have a tool called an almond cow that literally takes all the guesswork out of it. I did see a really great reel and I tried this and it works. If you have like a really high quality blender, like a Vitamix ideally, you don't have to do anything. You can just blend the nuts and the waters until they're like all sort of, I don't know, emulsified into itself and it becomes like milk, and flavor it with whatever you want, dates or cinnamon, salt. And yeah, so that's easier for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing. I learned something new. I'm going to try that now because it's so difficult when you don't know what tools to use, and it's trial and error, and it's not easy to make the changes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want us to sound like, oh, it's so easy to just make these changes and grow. It's not easy, and that's okay. It's okay to try a recipe and learn that you messed up, put the wrong ingredients in it and it sucked.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean like you can't do it and you have to give up on it. It's learning that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to move forward and try something and then take 2 steps back and kind of regress and then move forward again and figure it out for yourself. It's not going to be an easy journey. Like you said, the journey is so interesting, but it's okay if you like I tried to make almond milk multiple times and I was like, okay, can't do this. Like, it's not working for me. But then I just switched my milk to oat milk and tried to do it that way until I could learn. One thing I did recently that I really, really loved, that I want to say, is I took cashews with some water and soaked them, and then got tomatoes and like peeled them and then put it in the blender and made this really good creamy like sauce that kind of reminded me of vodka sauce, like ala vodka. So good. But like just learning small different things I can do and trial and error and finding out I did not know how to make tomato sauce on the stove by myself. It did not work. But doing something different, trying it over and over again in different ways until I found what worked for me, and slowly learning to cook better and find different recipes.
I love that. It's so cool. I think, yeah, I mean, my biggest mission is to be able to support people and show that I am just as human as another. And like, even though I may be doing certain practices, you know, this way or maybe a bit longer, like I certainly make mistakes and I am still growing and learning and I am not doing it all right. But what I want to get across, like a line or whatever, I guess get my point across, is that like our hearts are very aligned and they're very synced up in so many ways. And I think ultimately we all want to make better choices. You know, like we all really have a desire to make better choices. We all want to be healthy. We all want to live a beautiful, long life. We all want to be happy. We all want to have great relationships. We all want to feel like we have something that makes us feel whole or held or trusted or loved or whatever. We want all of these things. It's just we're all trying to figure out how to, you know, basically sew that into our lives with so much on the outside that not necessarily aligns. And so, yeah, those are the conversations I enjoy having.
I enjoy it too, because I grew up hearing like, oh, you need to have balance, balance, balance in your life. And that became really overwhelming for me because like I couldn't make time to be even between school and working and having a social life and taking care of family members, just doing all of it and learning to just integrate different aspects. Instead of trying to find a specific balance, just integrating different things that I could do for myself during the day, integrating how my school and work can overlap and align, integrating how taking care of my grandmother can also look like cooking different recipes and incorporating different wellness strategies, even like skincare, and just learning and doing that stuff together. So learning that I could just integrate instead of trying to balance everything separately.
Yeah, you know, something that you said, you're so spot on, and something you said when we met the first time about having these like rigorous routines, or like how so many people have these routines that like they think are the, and maybe not even think that they like lean on to have a successful day or more balance in their day. I've actually learned this about myself before having kids. I really strive to have balance, and it was really hard because back when I was acting more full time, like my hours were just all over the place. I wasn't taking the best care of myself, wasn't sleeping enough. Adrenaline, is going all the time because you're performing. And one thing that I always had in my life, whether I was working or not, was fitness. And fitness became something that like I used as like a vice almost. And I learned a lot about it because I thought that if I didn't have it in a day or enough in a week, that like I just wasn't going to be okay. And now that I'm a mom and I'm juggling more than I ever have in very different ways, but very fulfilling ways, I have so much more acceptance around where my balance is today and how different it looks. Like, I don't have a morning routine that's always the same. Like my morning routine is that my kids are crazy sometimes and we're just getting through the morning. But like there's this like spirit to that, and there's this cadence that like I've grown to really love and accept as like being a part of my day that's like really kicked me in the butt and woken me up in other ways. And it doesn't look like I can work out as much as I'd like, but like that's okay. Like I have other practices in place that like I can pull from and go, okay, maybe I just need to take a few big deep cleansing breaths, or like phone a friend or whatever, journal. So it looks different, and it doesn't always have to be so routine, because I think the routine sometimes creates this monotonous and almost like a lack of luster or passion. Whereas if we're really connected mind and body, we can resonate with what we're feeling in the moment and adjust accordingly.
Yes, exactly. And that was the thing for me is, I would open TikTok and I see these people who have these like amazing, beautiful, like morning routines. I'd be like, oh, I need to do that on these night routines, and trying to stick to a specific routine that was working for someone else and not for me. And then feeling like I wasn't good enough, or like I was just doing everything wrong, and realizing that it's okay if I don't have the ability to do a 10-step routine every single morning before starting my day. Like that's okay, but looking at what I need. If I need to take time to breathe, that's like you said, that's one of the biggest things for me, because I do deal with a lot of anxiety. I want to be like perfect and make such a big impact and do all these things all the time. And sometimes I need to remind myself that like you can't change the world overnight. You can't just figure it all out overnight, and that's okay. It's just making time to take a deep breath during the day, or journal when I'm feeling anxious and I just need to get these thoughts out and process them. So it doesn't have to be the same practices every day at the same time, which is what I thought a self-care routine had to look like, and that everyone did the same practices. It's really just based on what you need and what you're feeling. And when you have the space to add it in one of my classes right now, we get to like practice being a therapist with a classmate. And my classmate was talking about just not having a lot of time to take care of herself. And something I said to her, I was like, wow, I should be listening to this myself. And I started to incorporate it. It's like, where can you schedule in like 30 seconds to breathe? Where do you have 30 seconds that you can just take a few deep breaths? Like, it doesn't have to be a 10-minute meditation. It doesn't have to be an hour-long breathwork session. It can literally be 5 seconds, 30 seconds of just taking a deep breath and giving yourself a chance to just calm down and reset for a second.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's such great advice. Yeah, I don't have much to add, although like I do feel like that's been a big through line recently for me, because you can get so hung up on not having enough time, but I can find time. Like I can find time. There are moments where I might not be using my time wisely. And also I think that there's respect in that. Like if you're not using your time wisely, that's perfectly fine sometimes. Like that's also a practice of self-care. And I think it's just over time, although this can feel very granular, it just becomes part of your nature, where like you kind of just know what your body needs, and you go through your day and you walk through it, and you can look out the window and you can feel this peace. You can sit in the sunshine. You could feel this love. Like you can go and eat something and feel like it nourished your body. You could do all these things, and it just becomes like part of your day. And little, like, do you know you're creating routine? And it might look like it's on a bigger scale, like an average over a year. What does my routine look like? But like, we are of nature, and there's a lot to be like fluid and flexible. But I do think that the breathing tip that you mentioned has probably been one of the best. I don't want to go too off topic, but it's something that I've been talking about a little bit more recently, and I opened up about. But my brother has suffered from addiction, and at one point, there's been many times where he's lived with us, and this last time, I was teaching him about breath work because, part of addiction for him looks like a lot of inhaling substances to feel a certain way. And when I taught him about this one breathing exercise that was so basic, but so impactful for me, he was like taken aback. And it was really cool to see someone who's like, needed, and I'm not saying this isn't for everyone. It's not a fix, but it's also something you can utilize for anyone. And it was just really nice to see it impact someone that like really needed something in that moment. Yeah.
I do want to say I saw your story about that, and it's so powerful the way you share and open up, and then now giving this tool that has helped him. It's so important that we have these conversations and we learn that there's different things we can do, different things that we can control within our own body, that we don't need to go and have something physically on us. I know for me, I thought self-care in the beginning looked like journaling all the time. I love to journal. I journal all the time, love it. But if I didn't have my journal with me, I would like panic and realize there are things that I could do just taking a moment and breathe. I'm always going to have like my mouth and my lungs with me. I'm not going anywhere without them. I can take a moment and just take that deep breath and help alleviate some stress. And then with breath work, was it the like box breathing thing that was like, or not the box breathing, but it's like stomach, chest, exhale?
No, not that one, but though I really want to learn about that one. It was just the very simple, basic one where you inhale through your nostril and you hold it at the top for about 5 to 7 seconds, and you inhale really deep, like you're really taking the biggest hit ever. And that's how I was like, bringing it up to him, like just inhale like you've never inhaled in your life. You just hold it there and you hang on to it. You have your eyes closed and you're sitting peacefully and your body's relaxed and at peace. And then when you exhale, you just feel this wave of like settlement. Like you feel like your body just settles in for a second. And like, maybe there's a touch of lightheadedness, but it also just brings you back to the present. But I want to hear about that one that you're talking about.
Oh yeah. So it's basically you you breathe through, it's mouth breathing. So you breathe through your stomach, then your chest, and then you just exhale. It's like and you do it constantly for about like 20 to 30 minutes. And you will feel like you have to do it laying down, and you'll feel like a little lightheaded and your body's like kind of vibrating, I guess, in a way. And like you don't necessarily feel completely in control. It's like you're just in control of your breath. And for me, that was a great way to understand what I was feeling and different feelings that are coming up, and just connect to myself in a way that I never had before. People like refer to it as a gateway to meditation because it just brings you to that state where you can kind of completely calm your body and connect to those like unconscious thoughts. And then when you kind of come out of it, for me, like there were times where I would just like cry it out. I even realized like I needed a good cry like halfway through it, or like playing affirmations in the background while you're doing it. Amazing. Such a great way to do it. But it's just connecting to yourself in a different way. And you feel this kind of like, I don't even know how to describe it, but this like vibration throughout your body that just feels so good and just feels so connected for the first time.
So cool. Yeah, our senses are so powerful and also can be so triggering. And then like I was thinking about like being that sensitive when you're in a safe environment and when you're ready to like accept that sort of sensation, you can really go deep and do some healing. But on the flip side, something that I wanted to talk about, similar to like what you were bringing up earlier about like just toxins and fragrances and things of that nature. When you are so sensitive, like myself, I'm easily affected by things as well, because I kind of have simplified so much that like anything that's not of this sort of like energy impacts me. Like, for instance, just like a silly example is like I had to stop wearing perfumes. Maybe I feel like it happened over time, but like in the last year for sure. I stopped doing a lot of things. And I really just simplified, and it's helped me and like my sensitivity level a bunch. Like, I don't think people realize what they're being exposed to and how it's actually triggering like feelings or senses. And when you're triggering so much, like when we're trying to descale or like come back to ourselves, these kind of things are in the way of that. Like, I don't know if you've seen recently, and this is just one example. People use, Glade or Tide or whatever laundry detergent. And I haven't used scented laundry detergent in a long time, and someone was here and used it, and it literally filled up our house. And anytime this person walked into the room, I was like affected by the scent. And I just thought, like, I can be hard on myself for being so affected, or this could be just a lesson for me to understand that, like, I've really simplified to the point where, like, scents like that trigger me, and it really upsets, like, my endocrine system. Like, I can feel the difference in my body. Whereas, like, food cooking and the sense of food in our home has a very different effect. It brings me peace and joy and safety and love and, like, compassion for myself. But yeah, being sensitive and like understanding how to get your body to feel certain things is it's a really powerful tool.
It is, and I so relate to that. So I do the same. I don't use any scented or dyed laundry detergent. And my grandma, for some reason, I don't know why I trusted her to use the Instacart by herself, and she ended up buying one with dye and ended up having to throw it out because the smell like on the clothes made me feel so like just weird in my head. Like I just didn't feel good. And I didn't realize how sensitive I was to it until I was re-exposed back into it. Or like different perfumes and like colognes can feel really overpowering to me, or even body washes. Like I showered at my cousin's house and used her like scented body wash. And it was just like literally just had me sneezing nonstop. I like felt so congested. And I didn't realize how these things were impacting me, and how when I removed them, I started to feel better. And it really brought me back to those moments where I did not feel good at all. I went back and forth trying to figure out what was wrong with me, running around to different doctors until I finally went to like this women's comprehensive center, and the doctor wanted to do a more holistic approach. So she ran every blood work possible, had me do an MRT panel, and just figure out different things in my life and my environment that were impacting me. And when we started making those changes and figuring out even just different supplements that maybe my body was low on different vitamins, or different foods that I could eat that get those vitamins, I started to feel so much stronger and healthier. I didn't have these migraines I was getting every day that were making me physically sick. And now just when I'm exposed to that stuff again, I feel how sick it makes me. And it makes me so happy to see that making those changes have helped me move so much forward in how I'm feeling and how I'm performing in life now.
It's amazing. Yeah. I think that there's so much to be said around like the health implications that some of these things can have on ourselves. But another way to even just think about it, that's even more just like basic, is that like when we are distracted in any way, shape, or form, like our body's working harder to like focus and like stay on track, right? And what I find myself struggling with when there are too many sensory things going on, like maybe I'm just highly sensitive, I'm sure I am, is that like it takes me off course. It takes me out of my purpose. It takes me out of my drive, my just like my healthy, balanced mind at the time. And usually those things come in like a sensory form, like a scent or a sound or some sort of like whatever. It feels like chaos sometimes. And when I think about like kids, right? I think about how like some people really believe, and I do too, but it's hard to avoid in the world that we live in, that like certain colors, like bright colors, bright flashing lights, sounds should be avoided. by children, because they're so pure and they're so innocent, and any sort of like overexposed, whatever, if they've been overexposed to those kind of like stimuli, it's like, it really has an impact on their body, their mind, their attention span. And that's when I think you hear a lot about, if you want to talk about like that, and then in addition to like dyes and colors and sugars and additives and antibiotics and all of these things that are just being injected into like something so pure, you can hear someone talk about, things like ADHD and things of that nature, where I think, maybe both can exist, but I also believe that we're doing a really bad job of like looking at our system in which we live in and the things that really do have an impact, even though they may seem little and so normal.
Yes, absolutely. I remember, so my younger brother lives with ADHD, and I remember the doctor saying when he was younger, you have to be careful, like red dyes and blue dyes with milk, with his exposure to like video games and TV that's constantly like flashing. And I like wish we paid more attention to that stuff back then. Like we tried to listen, but we're like, whatever, he likes the red Gatorade or the blue Gatorade. Granted, I'm like 3 years older than him, so I can't say like I had any real influence in it. But that's kind of like the approach my family took. It was like, oh, well, he likes it, so we can't take it away from him. But these were things that were causing his ADHD to get to a point where he had to be so highly medicated and it would mummify him so that he could pass school, when there were factors in his environment influencing it that we could have taken out and removed and lessened the impact and influence it had over him.
I relate to that 100%. I had the same situation in my family with my brother, who was also labeled a number of things and medicated for a number of things. And I have a lot of trauma around it, because I was 3-4 years older than my brother as well. And, you're old enough to understand when something feels wrong and like you're scared. And I was terrified every time he had to take his meds, because I knew that like shortly after I would lose him to like a different feeling, a different version of him. He didn't eat. He was skeletal looking, just numb, completely numb. And I have some work to do in regards to just like the resentment I have. And unfortunately, I do believe that that's played a role in his upbringing and like the feeling of needing to be reliant on substance, to feel at peace. So yeah, I don't know what it looks like, but I really want to be able to help, I really want to be able to help people before they just get stuck in a trap that could eventually get worse.
Likewise. And it's just, that's why it's so important to have these conversations on holistic wellness and all these different environmental factors that are playing such a big role in what we're putting around us, in our body, on our body, just paying attention to all of it and the small changes that we can start to make for ourselves. And then for our children or our loved ones, for the next generation, and being able to, so many kids these days are being diagnosed with all these different disorders and giving all these different medications. And not saying that it's not always, like, there aren't situations where it is needed, and that's very important. But a lot of things could be avoided if we looked at the environment and started making changes earlier on, or never exposing them to the things that can really hurt and influence them in a bad way.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I'm just so grateful for people like you being as motivated and focused as you are. And just, yeah, like it feels really special that you even found me, because I don't even know if you knew what I was actually like thinking and, dealing with, and like how much I wanted to like share. But yeah, it's cool. And I have hope. Like I certainly have hope that like there are more people that are waking up to this kind of insight and willing to share and willing to create more solutions and support. Starting with you being one of them.
Thank you. And likewise, it's so great to have people who are willing to have these conversations, who are willing to speak up. I love the way you do your Instagram posts. And I've recently kind of started changing my Instagram posts to be more truthful on what's happening in my day instead of trying to come up with like a fun caption to get likes, but just like being honest on things I'm learning. And that was one of the things that really connected me to you and made me want to reach out. And now we're able to have a great conversation that hopefully other people will resonate with and find some kind of hope or tool or inspiration through. Daniella, you've been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.